has happened?
There we go.
Hey!
Hey!
Magic.
You let me in. That's nice.
Yeah, I was like, wait, why it's only me? Why is it saying recording already?
Wait, Martin, what happened? I made my lights go like your hair, and then you didn't. You're off brand?
Yes. If you look carefully, then it also is very messy right now.
Okay,
basically, I came back from a dive, and I'm diving quite a bit now that I'm kind of like stuck in this country, and we have plenty of lakes and rivers. So while diving is fun and great and relaxing and everything, it is not exactly conducive to keeping a vibrantly colored hairstyle. So I can't be arsed to like keep changing the color. It's like, wow. I'm actually considering cutting it off because it's easier for diving, but I know. See, that's the face pretty much everyone, not as beautiful as yours, but like basically that's the face everyone makes when I say that. So I'm not sure. So far, what has kind of kept me from doing it is that sometimes like some people on the internet get mad at my hair and I'm like, I'll keep it that way just for you. But they have stopped being angry at it. So I'm like, oh, damn.
Now you've got no direction. Well, it looks like people are joining. I can see the numbers ticking up. People are finding their way over from the
That's amazing.
from the stage to the various sessions. So they've arrived just in time to hear you and me prattling on about like hair maintenance. So I don't know if that's what everyone was expecting.
I don't know. It's kind of branding related, I guess. So
kind of.
In some way.
I'm sure people know you already, but if anyone who doesn't know Martin, so I've met Martin like only a handful of times actually, but there was a little phase where we would always bump into each other at conferences. Martin was always giving like ridiculous talks that would be like digging into some deep, incredible thing to do with JavaScript or CSS that would make people go, "What?"
Yeah.
But more recently, actually, say recently, a while ago now, you joined Google, and you're part of the. Let me make sure I'm going to get this wrong. The Webmaster Trends
Analyst.
team.
Yeah,
analyst team.
That's you're pretty good, but. To be fair, not to like rain on your party, we got renamed into developer relations for. Sorry, no. See, I get it wrong.
I mean, what chance?
It's search relations. It's search relations now.
Search relations.
Yeah.
I think that's an online dating service, isn't it? Search relations.
I mean, why not?
Oh, fair enough. But you have search. Yes, the questions are search relations.
Yeah, Google search relations.
But you are Captain SEO these days. Is that right?
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to be fair, like the other team members on my team are also like SEO captains, and it's amazing to be part of that team.
Yeah.
But I learned so much, and it has blown my mind. Like what looks very simple and easy from a developer's perspective on the outside turns out to not be as easy necessarily. And I wish I would have known these things earlier.
Well, because I mean, I'm assuming you're cool with people just bundling in with questions, but we could just
Hi,
chat.
Ollie.
I know it's a cocktail hour.
Oh, right. I don't have you are a pro. I only have beer, but then again, it's Friday evening. It's a cocktail hour. I'll have let's see if I can do this properly. With like a little bit of. Yeah, no, I fucked this up.
Good, because I imagine that if between us I don't know how this works, but if between us we get you drunk, then you'll tell us the very, very like deep secrets of Google's algorithm.
People tried this multiple times. It hasn't worked so far. I have a pretty high tolerance for alcohol. However, I have to be careful now because I haven't been drinking alcohol in a long time, so I might be more easily affected. And it's really warm, but whatever. Oh, also, I brought popcorn just in case, because usually questions like in sessions like these usually bring me to eat popcorn.
Well, as long as you've got enough for everyone, that's the main thing. But yeah, if people want to ask questions, that's great, and we could just hang out and chat. But I imagine that SEO is very different these days to what it used to be, because the web used to be so much simpler. I sound like an old, like, groaning old web hippie. It was like, oh,
It's true.
When I was a kid, it was all just static HTML files, all right the way to the horizon.
And then there was this newfangled CSS.
And like single page applications and stuff now. So you've got I guess, is that where does it get complicated for you? Is it when websites are like have content in JavaScript, or is it just it's all complicated?
The complications are in places where you would not necessarily expect them. So, for instance, one big problem is it starts at the beginning, kind of, right? So you have a website with like 1 million pages because you are a really large news company, or you are a really large, let's say you're an e-commerce company. You have 5,000 products in various variations, each having a different page associated with it. So you end up with like 5 million URLs, and you literally just basically start your new website, or you start your business from scratch.
Yeah.
And now there's this website with 5 million URLs. We as Google Search send in, or have to make a decision here. Can we just make 5 million, assuming that we magically somehow get all the URLs, because maybe you submit them in the sitemap, can we just make 5 million HTTP requests to your server in one go? Maybe not the best idea, right? But then again, if we are not making 5 million requests in one go, then how many do we make? 1 million? 100,000? 10? 5? If we make 5, it's going to take long until we actually get all the URLs in, and it's not the end of it, right? As a developer, I thought like, yeah, they crawl it and then they have it and then that's it. And then I'm like, yeah, but hold on. If 1 million URLs update every day, and it's not the same URLs that update every day, how does Google know?
How does it
know when to? Yeah, that's a good question. And originally, we had this beautiful sitemap XML format that allowed you to specify these things. And there were things like, it's an XML file where you say, like, I have this URL, I have that URL, I have that URL. And then you can specify things like priority, which hypothetically is fantastic. But now the problem is everyone in the web basically says, all my URLs are priority 1.
Right.
It's not a very useful signal anymore. And I'm like, oh, damn. This is harder than I thought. And so there are a bunch of things that you need to manage and understand if you have a really large website. Normal websites with, like, let's say a few thousand pages, not a problem.
For people who've got websites like that, I mean, is it a question of populate a sitemap XML and just like bung it at Google and job done, or is there a little bit more nuance than that?
It's a little more than that. You also want to make sure that your server responds with a successful HTTP status code, so 200 something. You want to make sure that it responds quickly, because if your server starts to slow down, we'll be like, okay, we have done a little too much. We're just we're gonna calm down for a little bit. Yeah. And then you want to make sure that you're not giving. So sometimes you have like, it's called Faceted Navigation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term. Where for those who aren't, you have like lots of filters that you can have. Like, I want men's clothing between the size 10 and 11 and in blue, but it has to be 100% cotton, and it has to be deliverable in the next week. And then you have like one result, and that's a page. That's a URL that hypothetically we could find. And then we end up with this infinite crawl spaces where we crawl lots of pages that are absolutely useless. Not just to the searchers and Googlebot, but also to you, because you're like, why does this show up in search results? Or why was this crawled? It will never show up in search results because it's an empty category. Good job, Google. So you want to manage that a little bit. There are a few ways of managing that through both robots meta tags and sitemaps and the parameter tool in Google Search Console. And you see there's like a bunch of stuff, and it doesn't stop there. And then there's like localization. And
I was going to say, because like, when you're in the scenario where you've got a site that's backed by, that's effectively dynamically rendered because you've got a database behind it and you've got a gazillion permutations, you might not easily be. I don't know if a gazillion is a suitable number. But
that's a suitable number. Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's not necessarily practical for you to say, well, I'll populate an XML file that will describe every possible URL, because I mean, there are so many permutations that you just might not be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I guess that gets crazy complicated.
Yeah.
Quickly.
And there's like so much more. How do we deal with 404s? If you give us a 404 page, do we just stop crawling that URL? But what if it comes back?
Yeah.
Tricky.
Right. Yeah. So do things like having like 404s on your that are discovered on your site because of spidering that happens on your site or what have you, would that ultimately rank against you? Is that a ranking signal?
No.
It's not.
Because a page disappearing or being removed is a normal thing. There's nothing bad about it.
Right.
If you're no longer offering a service, if you're no longer having a product, it goes away. That's life.
Yeah.
But interesting question. You know how to build single page applications, right? You're doing that every now and then, right?
A bit. Yeah, I do a bit of that. Yeah.
So how do you get your client-side rendered single page application to give the server an error response when there is no content? Let's say like you build a single page application to rate cat images, and then there is a URL of a cat that gets removed. How do you deal with that?
From a single page application?
Client-side rendered specifically.
Sorry, say again?
Client-side rendered, that's specifically. Like, as in, like, you're shipping static content, and then you have an API that powers the data.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. So I don't do that much single page application stuff, if I'm honest. So I do, yeah. So it's funny because people often ask me about that because I talk about Jamstack stuff a lot. So often people think, well, that's single page application client-side rendering stuff, right? Which it can be, you can, because that all can be statically served. It can be some HTML and a blob of JavaScript that does everything in the client. Typically, I find that if you want to be serving something that's got content, I like there to be a URL that will return that content. Yes. Now, that's not to say that I don't also think that doing client-side rendering is great as well, but I like that to be an enhancement on top of something that will return a response.
And I agree.
So that means that my preference is when every URL of a site should be an entry point. So someone could come in anywhere and they shouldn't have to, I think, get a bundle of the entire site and then it should be, okay, we'll give you the view and then we'll enhance with the content that will get you to elsewhere.
And then I imagine you can sidestep that problem.
Say again?
You sidestep the problem that I post, which is amazing, because then your server just goes like, no, that content doesn't exist. Sorry, 404.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, that's my slight issue with client side, so single page applications, because often, not always, but often they don't have a traditional response to every URL.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the client-side based router goes like, oh, I don't know that, and then shows like some sort of error page, but it isn't really an error page because the server has already responded, yeah, sure, here's some HTML and the JavaScript blob that will decide what you'll see.
Right.
And I had to figure that one out because that's such a common use case these days. And I'm like, oh, yeah, not great. Because so far Google's response has been, yeah, just give us a 404 and then you don't have that problem.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. And there's a comment in the chat as well that SPAs can have some accessibility shenanigans as well.
Absolutely.
And, right,
yeah.
Totally. Because I guess you're not getting the benefits of semantic HTML. The browser knows exactly what to do with. You've got to recreate that kind of yourself.
Yeah.
So I know you posed me a challenge, and I cheated by saying, well, I would do something different.
I just like to see. It's, for me, this is fantastic because this is an opportunity for me to like reality check myself, because when I was posed with this problem, I'm like, am I just not very smart? And I just am I the only one struggling with this? And it's really, really hard to find out if it's really just you or if it's an actual larger problem. And then I was like spending some time digging, and I found, no, okay, it's a bigger problem. That's cool. And every now and then, I don't know how you think about SEO, but I'll be damn honest at this point. As a developer, for a long time, I thought, how hard can it be? Just like you just put the right content in, and then you put the website online, and then that's it. That's done.
Yeah, this might be one of the reasons that I don't work in SEO kind of consultancy. But yeah, I also thought, well, make the content meaningful, make it deliver it with semantically constructed HTML, put some sensible kind of meta tags and description tags and title attributes in there. And there's like, right, I'm finished. And again, I know that there's more to it than that. But by the same token, is that a reasonable place to start?
It's a reasonable place to start. And it's a very surprising place to start, because I know that when you and me started making websites, putting in a title and meta description per page that we created was a standard thing to do. If it comes from a database because you have a PHP script or Perl script powering it, or if you literally hard-coded into the HTML, but every page you had a meta description and a title that was specific to the page. But if you read the tutorials of pretty much every JavaScript framework out there, be it React, Angular, Next, Vue, whatever. No, actually, no, Next is a bad example because they are doing it right, and Nuxt too. But like the original ones, like Angular, Ember, all these, they're like, oh yeah, you have this HTML file that you create once that has like the name of your application as the title, and then maybe some, if they're fancy, they have some meta description that describes generally what your website is. And then they never touch it ever again. They just basically, everything else happens in the JavaScript. And then they end up with this website that has a bazillion pages and all say, my fantastic website. And I'm like, that's not a good title. This is not your homepage. This is a product. Why does the title not reflect the product?
Yeah. I mean, so going back a little way, I mean, I used to be a little bit critical of doing kind of lots of client-side JavaScript rendering because I understood that it was difficult for Google to find that content. But then, there was this kind of pattern of doing like the hash bang in the URL. And then I seem to recall, wasn't there a convention of, well, if you construct it this way, Google will follow those links and you're fine again. But did that go away, or did that where are we with that? Can Google? Here's the $1 million question. Can Google discover the content that's in my site if the content is delivered from a JavaScript API?
Yes. Generally, yes. Unless you screw up, which obviously is possible.
It is.
No surprise there. But
yes.
I think, so on one hand, I'm definitely a big critic of doing too much JavaScript. On the other hand, I have to say that especially in the SEO circles, they give JavaScript more of a bad rep than it deserves. Where it's like, if you use JavaScript, your SEO is dead. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not true. Sure, if you configure your server to just basically not serve any data, then you have broken your website and it's not working with SEO, but that is not on HTML, but that's on the fact that you're not serving the HTML that the content is made of. And the same with JavaScript. If you build a JavaScript web application and you're not making any stupid mistakes, we can see it. And what you're saying with the hash bang, that's actually a pain point, because that's called the Ajax crawling scheme.
Right.
That used to be a really laborious workaround, both for the people implementing it and for our infrastructure, in fact. And we figured, okay, so even the people who implement it usually implement it incorrectly, and then end up having more problems than any positive outcome. So we deprecated that in 2012, 13, something like that.
Yeah, I imagine it was around that time, yeah.
It is very long gone, but it still sometimes kind of works. And then people are like, but it still works for my website. I'm like, yeah, but that's like, you're lucky that it works. Yeah. That's right. More incidental than something that you should plan on for the long run. Instead, what we did...
Yeah, so go on. Instead, what we did...
So instead what we did is we worked on rendering every page that we see and rendering it with an evergreen Chrome.
What do you mean by rendering it? Do you mean you've what do you mean?
We have basically what happens is we have a headless browser loading the website, and then we take whatever is the content out of that. The reason Puppeteer exists in the form it exists today is partially because of Google search.
Right. Wow. I'm just trying to get my head around that on the scale of the web.
It's amazing. The stuff we see when that happens. People try to mine Bitcoins on our infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
That was cool. That was fun.
Interesting. Oh, I love it. I mean, I don't love it, but I think it's fascinating.
I loved it. I'm like, wow. I mean, why not?
I mean, just
sure.
The horsepower required to do this on the scale you're talking about is ridiculous. Because I mean, maybe I'm a little bit damaged by using things like Puppeteer for other tasks. Like, well, because I've used it, for instance, for in a build step. At the end of the build, I'll then hit a bunch of URLs to generate like open graph images, so it'll be like, okay, for each URL there'll be a little template, and I'll just generate a PNG from that as part of my my build script. And I'm using Puppeteer sometimes for that. It's a bit of an old school way of old school. It's probably not the most elegant way of doing it, but effectively it was doing create a view, snapshot it in as a PNG, and that took a little bit of CPU power to do it. I mean, it's a little bit intensive. So doing that as a way of discovering the content for the internet is that's not running on a Raspberry Pi, is it?
No, it is consuming considerable amounts of resources. And the thing is, the reasoning behind it is that we say our mission is to make the world's information available, accessible, and useful. And the web is moving forward. The web is moving towards becoming more of an application platform rather than just a document platform as it used to be. And for that, you need JavaScript. JavaScript is not the evil. It is an important motor for what the web is becoming and is today and will become in the future. So we got to adopt that technology, and we have to be able to process it at scale, at web scale, which is large.
Right. Yes. I mean, I suppose. We talk about like the Ajax crawling scheme, and however else you're going to discover the endpoint in the first place, right? But the fact that the JavaScript isn't necessarily constructed in a way that's semantically meaningful means that you've got to go to these other lengths of saying, okay, well, now we'll have to find a way of rendering each thing to kind of fake it being in a browser. Well, I mean, make it be in a browser.
Make it be in the browser, in fact.
See the results. That's just, it's kind of a brute force way of solving a problem that comes about from content no longer being in like the content markup. But as you say, the web is evolving, so it's like finding solutions for that.
And I see it's quite interesting. We saw that I think in the beginning when the web platform was stagnating a little bit, basically before HTML5 came about, and like everyone was doing their own little thing, and then we came up with jQuery basically. That was a reaction to the fact how the web platform, like the state of the web platform, informed the design of things like jQuery and Mojo and Dojo toolkit. It was MooTools was the UI library, but Dojo was the thing, and Prototype and whatnot. And then the web caught up. So jQuery isn't as relevant anymore, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily say it's completely irrelevant, but it's definitely not what it used to be and when it was conceived. And that's a good thing. That just means that the platform has caught up with what was actually needed. And I think what we have been seeing the last couple of years with the client-side JavaScript is exactly that. It's like basically, so the platform doesn't give us the primitives to build these interactive applications sustainably. So we have to like improvise and basically build something in a kind of hacky way. Because if you think about it, client-side rendered single-page applications are kind of a hack because they work around basically they work around the actual browser primitives of navigations and how browsers construct DOM trees. And I think we are now at the point where we have experimented enough to be far enough into how we want, what we want the web to be and how we want single page applications to look like, that we are now seeing the catch up, not necessarily from the web platform, unfortunately, yet. But what we are seeing is that a lot of the frameworks like React, Vue.js, Angular, they have these things that basically allow you to do server-side rendering plus hydration, or the Jamstack. The Jamstack is a fantastic example of that as well, where you're like, I see what you want to build, but instead of building something even more wild on top of the hacks that we already use, instead of doing that, we kind of like go back and see like, okay, so this is where we left a stable place. This is where we are now, where it's basically turtles all the way down, and we just hope none wakes up and moves. So how can we bridge from here to there, and then you build like better solutions and building blocks to get there? And I think that's something that is happening right now. We see things like Gatsby and Next.js and all of these like things that allow you to kind of get the best of both worlds, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Before I let the chat scroll past something that I think it would be interesting to talk about, Lindsay made an interesting comment. I'll just read this right out. So I've seen a strategy of avoiding 404s at almost all costs by instead just doing a 301 redirect to some more general page. Oh, yes, I've seen this so much as well. Just so there are no 404s. But as a developer, it bothers me because how it is helpful to redirect someone to something that's not just truly a new home to what the person was looking for. I wish there was no stigma about 404s. And yeah, I've seen this as well. It's like, yes, it doesn't exist, but now you're over here instead. Have you seen that kind of pattern? And do you think that's happening from like an SEO standpoint, or probably just trying to make sure that everyone finds their way to content that can be useful for the publisher?
I think it's misguided helpfulness or misguided marketing, in the sense of, and I gotta take some of the blame, I guess, because I think it's as in like not me personally, but so we have Search Console, which is a great tool and shows you what's going on with your site in terms of search. But a bunch of people use it. It looks deceivingly simple, but it actually isn't as simple. It gives you a lot of data that a lot of people don't necessarily know how to deal with. For instance, it gives you reports. It gives you a coverage report. And in the coverage report, it shows you pages that are in the index and pages that are not in the index. And the way that people use this report is that they say, oh, I ignore whatever is in the index like that. I don't need that. I'll zoom straight into the things that are not in the index. And whatever Google says, if it's not in the index, that must be an error. Right. And that's not true. It's not an error. It's just the fact that something is not. I mean, I think we probably even say like error in the sense of it is an error from our perspective. It is, we tried to index a page and we couldn't. So as far as we are concerned, it's an error. Something went wrong when indexing. A 404 is an error from an indexing point of view. But not from a logical point of view from the consumer or from the webmaster, from the person running the website. It's not really an error. And the problem is that the approach is wrong. What you should do is you should look into the section where you see the pages that are in the index and look for gaps. As in like, I know I want this page with the newest product that we have on offer. That should be indexed. And then you check if it is indexed. And if it's not indexed, you check why it's not indexed. If a page that you would expect to be the best page ever on your website is a 404, that is an actual legitimate problem that you need to address. Misconfiguration, failed deployment, whatnot, I don't know, but it's definitely not what you expected. But if something that you removed is a 404, whatever, it doesn't. That's not a problem. It's a page you didn't expect to be in the index in the first place. So if that falls out of the index, who cares? So I think we are partially to blame for that because people use that tool inappropriately sometimes. And on the other hand, I think it's actually like, oh yeah, but we can use this opportunity. It's probably a conversion, or what's it called? CRO, conversion something optimization, conversion rate optimization. That's what it is. Because you kind of got a lead, someone goes onto that page, it's a 404, and now you've lost them. But the idea is, what if I redirect them to something else? Maybe they see something that interests them and then they stick. Which is unfortunate because, I mean, if it's done well, then actually it's not a problem. But more likely than not, you're doing something stupid in one way or the other. And and search is not going to reward you for it. Quite vice versa, because if it's a 404, if it's a 301 or 302 redirect, we'll be like, oh, so the original URL doesn't really matter. All right, fair enough. Then we kind of like ignore that, disregard that, and then we crawl the other one, which might mean that we are now crawling two URLs because the other one might come back. It's a redirect, right? It might come back at some point. So we're just going to check it out every now and then. And that's wasting crawl budget. That's wasting crawls that could go somewhere where it's more useful.
Yeah.
So why don't you 404 the page?
Yeah. It's just chatting about that has just made me think another place that this happens, which isn't the web, is Netflix. Netflix search. If I search for a movie on Netflix, if I search for The Incredibles, and it gives me a result in the search, it auto-completes it. It says The Incredibles. I gleefully scroll down to it, and it says, here are some movies that are not The Incredibles that might be...
you might like them.
You might like them, but it's not what you wanted. But please don't go to the other place where you can see it.
Sorry, I hate it.
I do apologize. This is
no, but it's true. I was searching for a movie that I didn't know wasn't out yet. I thought like someone sent me like a movie title and like, I want to see this movie, and I'm like, oh, good point. And then I went to Netflix and it auto completed, and I'm like, yes, this is amazing. And then I'm like, no, none of this is why is
lied. Yeah, but yeah, websites do that as well, and I think that's exactly the kind of thing that was getting Lindsay's heckles up as well. Thinking you redirected me to some other thing. I guess it can. If it's done well, it can be a utility. It's like, okay, well, this is the next best thing that you probably are looking for now, and there's lots of ways that can be useful. But
why are you not so honest to say like, whoopsies, this is no longer available, or this is not available, but maybe you like these. That is an error page that I would be like, oh, okay.
That's fair, because it's not just about the content of the page. We're talking about the response code and the content. That's totally fair. Yeah, totally fair.
And both.
Hey, I wanted to move on to another.
Yes.
Can I move on to another thing that I've seen in the chat? So Sjord asks, what's going on with AMP currently in SEO land?
That's a very legitimate question.
Any thoughts? I mean, that's a very broad question as well.
Yeah. Wow. Sure. You want me to give a little bit of background about this, and then like?
Well, first of all, I mean, let's just say. Is it generally considered to be useful for your search results to be like putting content into AMP?
Yeah. Okay, so the question got specified or like more narrowed down to curious about the direction where it's heading. That's a good point. So here's the thing. I'm not on the AMP team, so I can't really like comment on the general plans of AMP. What I can say though, however, is having a fast website is good. It's one of our many ranking factors. We have hundreds of ranking factors, but one of them is the performance for the user, because we want so the mission from Google Search is to get the best content or the best responses or the best results to the user looking for whatever they're looking for. Yep. Now you can ask, what's the best result? Well, clearly it should be actually relevant to what you're searching for. That's the obvious one. But what use is, for instance, something that if I'm searching for a cafe while I'm in Zurich, I'm not sure why I would want to see a cafe in Berlin. So that's one thing that might be factored into what you see in the search results. Another thing is if I'm on a mobile phone and I tap on that tap on that search result that you just gave me, and it takes 20 seconds until I see something on my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the best search result? I'd argue no. Sure, if it has better content and it's worth waiting 20 seconds, sure. Which is why it's one of over 100 factors.
Right.
But still, if I have two that have fantastic content and one is much faster than the other, then I would say the faster one should outrank the other one.
Yeah.
That's the extent of ranking that I'll discuss here. But AMP was one way of building fast websites, I would say. It was a very interesting experiment at the beginning when it started out. And as part of that experiment, because surprisingly, Google does not have all the answers to all the questions and all the things that need to be figured out when it comes to building a search engine, we are experimenting as well. And one experiment was to give a little badge to websites that we knew were fast.
Yes.
At the time, we didn't know if a website was fast because we had no control and no good measurement. Yes, okay, sure, we knew at that time how fast the server would respond. But you know as much as I do that server response time is not what makes a website necessarily fast. And so we didn't have a way of like predicting, lapsus. There we go. Good morning, Martin. We had no way of predicting if a website would be fast or not. We had no way of measuring it either at the time. So we were like, well, with AMP, we know that we are putting it on our global distributed cache infrastructure. So you basically get a free CDN so that we can guarantee that it loads really fast. So we can like give it a little icon that says like, hey, this is fast, so that people can then choose if they want to risk something that is not necessarily like more or less instant, or if they want to go with something that is more or less instant. That has so many problems, obviously. Like the biggest problem being that we are then prioritizing content just based on technicalities, and it's unfair because a website can be fast without AMP. AMP is not necessary to build a fast website. You can build a fast website without AMP. So what we did instead is we invested in things like the Core Web Vitals. So we now have infrastructure that allows us, and the Chrome user experience report as well. We have infrastructure that allows us to have an idea of how fast the website will load, roughly, and how good it will be for the user in terms of performance, roughly. So we are not we're not taking away the little badge icon as far as I'm aware. At least I don't know of any plans of doing that. And I'm pretty sure a bunch of people would cry very loudly if we would do that, because once you give people badges, then they kind of get addicted to them. Like SmashingConf gives us cats, and I love them. So that's probably going to stay. But in 2021, we will create a new ranking signal called page experience. And part of page experience will also be the website performance measured by the Core Web Vitals and from Chrome User Experience Report. And so AMP is not necessarily needed anymore. Another thing is we had this wonderful feature called the Top Stories carousel. Right now, to get into the top stories, for various interesting technical reasons, you have to use AMP. That goes away as well in 2021. In 2021, you can get in the top stories carousel, and then there is no feature in Google search that you cannot get into without using AMP. And I think that's the biggest change. And I think it's a good change. I think it's a fair change. And I don't know exactly what the plan is for the AMP team, what their vision is. But as far as I understand it from an outsider's perspective, I see AMP as a bunch of components that you can use that take away a bunch of the tricky bits and pieces about web performance. And you basically get web components that happen to be fast by default unless you use them very wrong, which I think is cool.
Right. Yeah, and because that's the thing. I mean, there are so many facets to AMP, really. I mean, like you say, it's like a bunch of components that you can use and a bunch of conventions that you can say, if you adhere to these, and it kind of limits, it applies some constraints, right? Yeah. But it's constraints that help you go fast. So that's one thing. It's like, okay, I can't really argue with that. Then there's the other part which you'd mentioned, like being served from a super fast CDN. Great, I can see that could be advantageous, but then it starts to bring in the questions of it's like the web on Google, which I know is a sticky topic.
Yeah.
And there are obvious like potential issues with that down the line. But then the third attribute is by building things in this way, that's the only way you can get into the carousel and the top pages and what have you. So I've said that out loud, and it's a big cliffhanger. And there's someone at my door, and it's my food.
Oh,
so I'm going to
grab some food.
I'm going to leave you here dangling for 30 seconds. That's weird.
Okay.
Isn't
That's
it?
fine. No, it's fine. So actually, now that we have, you just go. Now that we have time for ourselves, like without Phil. No, just kidding. Yeah, I hope that was useful, and I hope that that is helping. I would ask the AMP team the same, but it's definitely, you can see with things like signed exchange, the AMP team is actively trying to solve the problem of bringing the AMP infrastructure to the whole web without limiting it to Google infrastructure. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if I answered your question, basically. Anyone else has any? No worries, that's fine. Dig in as well.
I might just
look. I have popcorn. You have food, so now I can like eat popcorn without feeling bad because you have food as well.
It's true.
There's a cocktail hour. This is informal anyway, so
it is informal. Sorry, are there any other questions that are kicking around in there? Because I was getting very, very deep there.
That's fine. That's okay.
Jimena is asking the right question. So I have had a delivery of Thai food. The team at Smashing are so nice because Amanda, who's pressing a lot of the buttons behind the scenes, said, because it's 10 to 10 here now, and it's been a busy old day. She said, "Tell us what you want, and I'll deliver you some food." And
nice.
she put a beer in as well, which I didn't ask for.
That's amazing.
So I'm winning every which way. So hooray!
This is a good. Nice. This is good time. This is good stuff. I enjoy my Swiss-made popcorn. There's caramel popcorn as well, just to when you're not doing any sports, you should at least live unhealthy. I'm curious. Scuba diving is sport. That's actually not true. Scuba diving is sport. So
is it?
It burns. Holy shit! 1 hour of scuba diving is like the most chill and relaxed thing ever, unless you're doing something stupid. It burns like 600 calories.
Really?
Yeah. And you're not sweating. You're not like
bobbing around. I didn't know that.
But so 1 calorie is the amount of energy you need to heat 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius.
Right.
So you are in cold water at this point, like 7 degrees water in my case. It's fine. It sounds worse than it actually is. But obviously your body is like constantly heating. So you burn a lot of calories, which is kind of cool. And how much calories does this actually have? I should probably...
No, don't do that to yourself. Come on now, don't do that.
No, actually, it's not... Hold on. So, I hate this. It's like 100 grams have... I'm like, how much is in here? I don't know. This is 100 grams? It should say somewhere, no?
The fact that they have to make you work for it means it's probably not good news.
Oh, so the entire bucket is 100 grams. And that's 400 calories. So even if I would eat the entire bucket, which I can't because it was already half eaten, I would not offset what I have. See, this is good.
It's worse.
This is food.
Well, I'm really relieved. I was worried. I was worried for you for a second.
Yeah. Or kilocalories, fine. Yeah, whatever.
So, are people in the chat? Are you all doing careful, diligent practices to make sure you're upping your SEO juice? Upping the Google juice, as people often say. Is that a big? I don't know if that's a horrible expression.
No, fine.
Is that something that's a big focus for people? I mean, often it seems like it's and also you need to make sure it's okay for SEO, depending on where you're working. It can often be a bit of a line item if you're not careful.
Oh God, link juice. Oh God.
I hope that's the effect you wanted, Lindsay.
Okay. So link juice fundamentally is bullshit. We don't necessarily say
well, that's not just a slang term. That's referring to something specific.
Yeah.
This is new to me.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember that, like 10, 20 years ago, there was like this wonderful thing called the Google toolbar with the PageRank thing. Do you remember that? Well, it showed you like
that,
your page has a PageRank of 5 or 7 or 8 or 9. Ooh, 9. So there's this like super old paper from, I think it's actually from Sergey and Larry, but I'm not sure. Where they explain how roughly you can build a search engine that is better than what has been built so far. Because the first generation of web search engines fundamentally just took the keywords that you would specify in a meta tag, and then if you type a query, it matches the query to keywords. So if I were to like try to spam, I would basically just, I don't know, if I try to sell fake Rolex watches, I would put in the keywords something like, I don't know, quality watches, Rolex watches, cheap watches, Rolex cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And then these search engines would not have any means of filtering out that that's bonkers or bogus content. And then you end up with like not great search results, I would say. So what Google did differently, the biggest invention, I think, that moved the market forward in terms of search engines, as far as I'm aware, was the PageRank algorithm, where basically you would say, okay, so a good page organically, which means just by being good, from itself, self-emergingly, gets linked to. So if I write a really good page about Rolex watches and finding the right one for you, lots of people who are interested in that topic will link to my page from their pages. So if I discover all these pages, I can check. So this page here gets 100 links into it, and it links to like these other, and these are also good in the terms of Rolex. And then you can match that, or you can basically model a score from that, where you say like, if a page links to a lot of good stuff about a topic, and other pages that are also about that topic link to you, that probably means that your page is good. Which means that we can use that as a way of like ranking things that are good higher.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That led to the fantastic market of link spam, where you basically just you probably, I think everyone who has an email address and or a website gets these fantastic emails like, "Hi, I would be interested in guest posting on your blog, blah blah blah." Don't do it. It's not good for you. It's not good for you. It's not good for them either. It's pointless because PageRank, the original PageRank, the way that it is in the papers, is not being used anymore. We have something similar to PageRank, not PageRank itself. And we are pretty damn good, even though people would, obviously, the people who try to sell you links dispute that, but kind of obvious though. We're pretty good at catching link spam these days. And if a link if you're doing this massively, like if you're basically a link farm where people pay you to put a link on your website, then we're just going to penalize your website. We're just going to be like, you are a horde of spam. We don't like this. Bye. Which actually hurts the rest of your website as well, which is not something that you want. So, and then there's this link juice idea, where people then started to hyper-focus on this PageRank and said like, okay, so we figured it out. Basically, a link in the header is worth 50% more than a link in the footer. And the link in the middle is kind of in the middle of it. So like you would have to put like you multiply the ones in the header with 1, you multiply the ones in the main content with 0.75, and then the ones in the footer are only like 0.5, and you only have a certain amount. So like you take the PageRank, you multiply that with these factors, and then you know how much a link is worth. But if you have too many links, then basically these 0.5 out of, so let's say you have a PageRank of 10, and then you have a link in the footer but you have 5 links in the footer. So from the 10, 0.5 is 5, and then you have 5. So each of them gets 0.1 of the link juice. And I'm like, that's really elaborate, but it's completely wrong. But I mean, it's cool that you thought this.
It sounds like science.
It sounds really like science, but that's not how it works. And when we say we have hundreds of factors that we look at when it comes to ranking, guess what? Even if it would work like that, it doesn't matter as much as people think. And so, like, if you hear link juice, you'll be like. So to be fair, sometimes people try to speak in the language of the industry, and then they use link juice to illustrate a certain concept, like links matter, surprise. And then they use that term, so I wouldn't necessarily run when someone says that. But if someone gets into like, oh, we should position that link somewhere else because of the link juice, then you know that they're basically, they're practicing voodoo.
Fair enough. Well, that brings us on to a really handy question, I think, that Bash asked in the chat.
That's a really good one.
So stakeholders often want to hire SEO optimization firms, but there are probably a handful of things that you could just like legitimately do, just the low hanging fruits just before doing that. So, what would the first few things just to like do good practice, apart from trying to win at Google, but so just like doing the right things to set you on the right path? What might some of those kind of just standards?
I love the question. I love the question because it is a big tricky thing for SEOs as well. Because if you put yourself into their shoes, especially if they're like consultants or external companies rather than in-house SEOs, if you're coming, especially when it's a startup, you come to a startup that has no idea of what they're doing, which is fine. It's a startup. They're figuring out. That's cool. Yep. But they're like, okay, so we have this really hard engineering problem that we want to solve. We have this really hard product market fit problem that we need to solve. We have a budgeting problem that we constantly need to solve or we go under. And now we need to figure out this SEO thing. And then you have 2 candidates. Candidate 1 comes in and says like, hi, I'm your SEO. I would like to be your SEO consultant. And I would help you identify who you're talking to, what your customers are looking for, and build like a strategy to create good content for them. And we would work together in like figuring out the technology side of things and build an infrastructure to monitor and test and debug things as well. But that requires your input, and I would require like an engineer and someone from marketing, and we would require a bunch of budget and a bunch of time, and we would have to actively work on this. You'd be like, okay, thank you very much. Next. The next person comes in and says like, you give me $500 and I buy a bunch of links and you'll be ranking number 1 in the next week. You're likely to hire that person, and that person is basically selling you snake oil, which is unfortunate. When he says, so Bash, when you say content is king mantra, content is king. That's the reality. If I am searching for something, I'm not searching for a very fast website, like all of these things true as well, but primarily I'm not searching for a very fast website. I'm not searching for a website that is built with a specific piece of technology. I don't search for a website that has many links. What I'm searching for is primarily I'm searching for a website that answers my question or fulfills my need. What that is depends on what you're doing. If you are a website that specializes on selling me ventilators because it's really hot in Switzerland right now. I don't know about the UK, Phil, but here it's like 30-something degrees. It's bananas. Yeah, it's warm. I'm so happy that I have my ventilator. I bought it just like a couple of days ago, and I'm really, really happy I have this here. If you're selling ventilators, your job is to probably tell me which ventilator I should buy, because surprisingly, ventilators start at like $10 and go up to like $500, and I'm like, it's a thing that rotates and gives me cold air because it rotates, a propeller. That's it. Why do I need one? What does I don't even know what it does that mine doesn't do, because I definitely did not spend $500 on it. So tell me which one I should get and where or how I can get it as cheap as possible, and like where I get it, and make that quick and make that a good experience, and give me links that explain to me the things that I might not know, and then you'll be good. for many startups, especially, it is often they don't even know how their audience talks about the thing they built, right? If to use a Rick and Morty example, if what your company is building is you're calling it a plumbus, but then fail to explain to me what the hell a plumbus is, I might need your product, but I might not know that I need your product because I don't understand your product to begin with. So when it comes to content, you want to make sure that you understand what people are looking for, where they are looking for it, how they are looking for it, because as I said, like for a ventilator, it might be as easy as like, just give me the cheapest one that I can get today, not in a month. I want it now. It's hot now, not in a month. People usually don't plan buying a ventilator. At least I didn't. I was like, it's hot, I need a ventilator. So give me one now, give me one for cheap, and I'll be happy. If you are building some really luxury things like, I don't know, mansions, you probably want to help people. You want to convince people that they need a mansion. You want to lure them in, that you want to like give them options. You want to show them what you got and why they need it. And you want to make a good, compelling sell, which means you need good content. And if you have good content for whatever people are looking for, like everyone says like, yeah, my website is fantastic. And I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. You are a local business. I click on your website and you say like, in our family, since the year 1865, we have really valued the craft and quality of our products. And it has always stayed in the family. And from generation to generation. And I'm like, what are you doing? What is your company? What does it, what? God damn it. That's not good content. That's terrible content.
But I think that's the key, right?
It's the key.
I mean, like you say, content is king, but and I guess one of the things that these consultancies might help with is helping you understand how to write the content and make sure that it is truly suited to your market and to your products and what have you. I think that's why it's hard to just say, here's a checklist of 10 words that you must include, and then you win at SEO. Because I guess the things that are pertinent to a luxury car brand and what people are searching for a luxury car brand are going to be different to someone who's selling like nasal spray.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to have different attributes that you want to see in the content. But I think, in spite of all that, there are probably like some fundamentals that are probably to do with just structuring content and adhering to kind of good semantics and those kind of things.
I love what Sean said in the chat. Like, best advice I heard in 15 years ago is you can't fool Google. Do the right thing with your content, semantic tags and URLs and also all that stuff, rather than chasing SEO optimization tricks. Yes, SEO optimization tricks might give you a boost in the short term, and then you fall back down. That's what a lot of people see. Like, they get short, quick results, and then they go down again because we're seeing through the game, basically, eventually, and that hurts you. And as you say, there's a few fundamentals. One is make the content that your users would want to look for. Let me rephrase that. Build the content that users are looking for, which might mean that you have like 4, 5, or even 10 pages with roughly the same content, not the same content, but like you discuss the same topic just from different angles. Because there are different kinds of inquiries, there's different segments of users, probably, or like customers probably, and you want to have, and I felt that multiple times. Many of my websites fell short of my expectations because I was like, I'm telling you what my service is. I don't understand why I'm not getting the search queries onto, like, why am I not showing up in search results? And the reason is that I tried to address everyone in one page, which means I addressed no one. If I have a page that explains my products, let's say like we are a company that builds houses, for instance, then there are people who are searching for construction company in the place where they are. So if you have a page that says, hi, this is Splitt construction company in Zurich, great page. That's lovely. That's fantastic. And you can explain why your company is better than the other companies and how you will help them in Zurich and why this is amazing. But then someone who looks for build a house cheap, which it might be your niche, or build a house fast if that's your niche. might not be seeing that page because they're not looking specifically for a construction company in Zurich. They want to build a house fast. And if you then have basically, it's still about your construction company, but you have a second page that says, we're getting your house built faster than the others or something like that, then that's a better result for that specific query. So you want to understand what people are looking for and how you're serving these different segments. And that's where a consultant or a copywriter or a content strategist can help you understand what kind of landing pages you need. SEOs love to talk about landing pages, and that's what you build. You build a bunch of pages that have very concise content for one specific interest, for one specific kind of query or group of queries. And then it feels like, oh, but we are like explaining our company on 20 pages. Does that make sense? 20 pages might be a little too much, might not be enough, depending on what you're doing. But you wanna structure your content so that you address each of these specific concerns. That's one thing. Then on the other hand, you need to get your technology right. Write semantic HTML. Yes, sure, we understand if your HTML is not semantic, but it is likelier that we make mistakes. It's easier for things to go wrong if you're not having an eye on making sure that you are on a stable, sound foundation. That's one thing. Make sure that you're not accidentally excluding the bot from things. If you're having a robots.txt file, make sure that that is bulletproof and only excludes things that you actually want to exclude. Make sure that things are fast. Make sure that things work on mobile phones. These are all things that you definitely need to get right. But a website that loads in 0.5 seconds, has beautiful design and amazing semantic HTML is not going to do much if no one finds it, because it is answering no questions, or it's not answering any demands. Not questions is the wrong term, but like if it's not answering any demand, it's not getting.
It's kind of what Yaron has just said at the bottom of the chat as well. Don't create content no one is Googling for, and I guess it's just the other way of phrasing exactly the thing of writing content that people are going to want to search for.
That's the other thing, especially if you're in something where there's a lot of competition. You might just not have the resources and the cloud kind of like, you might not have the name or the brand that can compete with. You might be on position 3, great, but if on position 1 is the brand, people will click on that. So if you find the thing that is large, it's a tricky balance. You need a segment that is large enough to be sustainable business for you, at the same time far enough away from the mainstream that not every other company is competing with you for that specific niche. So if you can find that, that's fantastic.
Right, that's good stuff. Are there any other questions in the chat?
What about chasing after featured snippets to be ready for when voice search gets big? Oh, God. Featured snippets are great if you figure out how to get them for what you're trying to do, but it's not for everyone. That's one thing. But sometimes, like, featured snippets are often a side effect of something that you do anyway. There is, if you search for Izzy Smith, she used to work at Sixt, which is a car rental company in Europe. And she figured that a lot of people are searching for how old you have to be to rent a car in whatever country they're in. Like, how old do you have to be to rent a car in Great Britain? How old do you have to be to rent a car in Netherlands? And she figured out that if they structure their page that has this information in a specific way, we are able to extract this information from the page and then show it as a featured snippet. And that drove more traffic to them. And she spoke about this publicly multiple times. And I find that a very inspiring story, because on one hand, like, lots of people are like, oh, featured snippets are stealing our traffic. On the other hand, people are clearly driving traffic to the website through featured snippets if they are using it right. So featured snippets are not useful just for voice search. They are generally useful, but they're not, if you're not having a featured snippet, it's not the end of the world. Sometimes featured snippets can hurt your traffic if people are basically getting the answer they're looking for and then there's no follow-up. Then that's where the transaction ends, and that's not necessarily helpful.
Right.
So I would say, like, try to figure out where featured snippets would make sense and where people would like likely click on the link to learn more and not like answer a closed question and then kind of like they drop off at that point. But I don't think voice search is going to be that big of a deal, because to me, it's just an alternative replacing the keyboard. We are already getting natural language questions, so there's not that much of a difference. And the tools kind of show you how the questions were phrased, and it doesn't really matter. Voice search is a bit overrated, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you just touched on. You reminded me of something from the Gov UK project in the UK. You know, the Global Government Digital Services, where they had a very specific search engine optimization strategy, and that was they want no visitors to come to the site. They want every visitor to be satisfied by, because people tend to search in Google, right? People search. So if they can answer their need in the results of that search and never come to the website, that's just fine.
Yes,
because the thing that they were selling wasn't, they didn't need to bring traffic in or to sell a product. They wanted to answer people's questions. So if someone could answer their question before they even arrived at the site, that was a win for them.
Yeah.
And I find that really fascinating to think about, you know, how you structure your content to try and expose it so that their journey ends there. And of course, for many of us, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring people from there into the site to then engage with other kind of service for whatever other reason. But it still starts with that first step of the right information.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there. We recently, like last year at I/O, we announced new structured data markup for FAQs and how-tos. And like a lot of SEOs traditionally who try, basically their business is to drive traffic to their website. And they were not very happy about it, because if you answer it's exactly that use case. If you answer the question in the search results, then why would I come to the website? But what they didn't see is that lots of companies are like, we have this like customer service infrastructure that gets so many questions that are in our FAQ page. They just don't click on the FAQ page. They just basically like type in their question, land on our customer support, and then they ask the customer support. This is annoying. These websites are really, really happy that now when we pick this up, the right information just arrives right in either like Google Assistant or in the Google search results. And they don't have to deal with the actual customer service inquiry anymore, because it gets caught earlier, which is amazing for them. Which brings me to a question from Aaron, actually, which is about Schema.org Markup. It is not a ranking factor, but it's still important in a way, because if you have structured data markup, it might, depending on what you use, it doesn't matter what it is, but like basically structured data helps us better understand the semantics of your content, which is always a win. We can then also map it to things like entities that we know of. So if you are a large brand and you tell us, oh yeah, this website belongs to this brand, then we can associate it with this in the knowledge graph. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you use structured data as outlined in the search gallery, you get eligible for, and you do it right, then your website becomes eligible for rich results, which usually drive more traffic. So it's not a ranking factor, but it can help you make your website stand out more in search results for free.
Bonus. There's also a question from Simon as well about URL structures, having a URL pattern of slug-id with slug being irrelevant for content identification. Is there really a difference in redirect to the correct slug instead of versus relying on
rel canonical? Yeah. Generally speaking, it is enough to rely on the. Oh no. Okay. Careful. Whoa. So if there is different pages with different slugs pointing to the same content, then we will have to pick a canonical. If you give us a canonical and we agree with the canonical you give us, everything is golden and wonderful. However, we use different signals for canonicalization, and if we get the canonical wrong and you don't like it, then redirecting is a way of kind of forcing us to understand that one thing points to the same thing as the other. I would start with the canonical and only intervene if the canonical somehow doesn't get picked up the way that you would expect it, because canonicals are being used incorrectly by lots of people, so we can't just take the canonical from what we're given.
Interesting.
The web is a very messy place.
Isn't it just? Awesome. Well, I'm kind of at the stage that I think I should go and eat some food.
Eat. I'll eat more popcorn.
Eat more
Dig
popcorn.
in. Well, as in Switzerland, we would say "Anguette."
Anguette?
Mm-hmm. Like bon appetit, basically. So the full sentence would be "Anguette appetit," but we leave out the last bit.
Simon jumped straight in there. Look, he knows.
Is our session ending now or something? I don't even know anymore.
I actually have no perception of how long this should run, how long it has run.
I think Amanda is going to kick us out eventually, I guess. I don't know.
Sure, I mean, eventually the conference ends, and we're all done. I think Amanda's saying she thinks we're the last ones, we're the last session sticking in there. I think everyone has kind of wrapped up.
The thing is, I have popcorn and no other plans, so here we go.
That's amazing. Well, I am going to sign off. I'm going to do the rounds.
All right.
It was really nice chatting to you.
It was really nice chatting to you, and everyone in the chat has been fantastic. Thank you very much for all the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for all the chat and what have you, and hope you enjoyed the whole event. So until next time, I will bid you adieu.
Goodbye, good sir. Looking forward to run into you eventually, hopefully in person again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hopefully before too long.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Take care. See you. Bye.